Yes, I
final
am.
speaker, the last speaker, is going to be Tamara James Wachai, representing Ron Aron International School in Bangkok, Thailand. And her keynote is going to be, and the title of the keynote is Developing English Speaking Contexts. So, kind of sitting in a hot balloon and not just looking at being on a as well, seeing the whole picture. Hello, Tamara.
Hi, good evening. I'm sorry, but I'm not able to share my screen yet.
It should be now. I made you.
It says still disabled.
Try it now.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right. So good evening, everyone. Well, for you, it is good afternoon. I'm very much honored to be a part of this conference. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because as you know, when we're sharing a presentation, it's very hard to see anyone. So if you cannot hear me or something, please just give a shout out so I know. So for my presentation, I know that you've been doing a lot of wonderful practical work, learning and practicing and discussing different ways to approach developing English for our students in international schools. For me, I am perhaps taking it in a slightly different direction. I'm going to talk a bit perhaps about the journey that my school had to take in its development and the discoveries that we've made, or particularly that I've made through that experience. So I have a video from a student to share, and I have some different pictures and things from my school. So yeah, let's go. So as you know, my name is Tamara James Wayachai, and I welcome all of you lovely teachers. It's very funny for me to think of you there in Latvia, and I guess those of us that are online in different parts of the world. I do want to have a small disclaimer. I am going to be speaking about some generalizations. So I'm also not an expert. I am just somebody that has been in this field a while and had a lot of different experiences. So there will be a lot of personal reflection here, which may or may not reflect the overall understanding of my particular school. And I do apologize in advance for any miscommunications that I might make. It's not my intention to be harmful in my speech or to make anyone feel uncomfortable. I do, as I said, speak a bit in generalizations about some things, so these will occur. And okay. So just a little bit about myself. I am an educator. I started formally as an educator in 1990, but I did stop for a while to be a journalist, which had been my dream job. I've traveled quite a bit from Taiwan to Thailand to Singapore, Mexico, Canada, Indonesia, and of course back to Thailand now. I'm a mother. I have two wonderful, lovely children, a daughter who's 27 and a son who's now 17. They won't let me use recent photos of them. You know how teenagers can be. So I have to respect that. And I am also a neurodivergent person, and I came to this understanding a bit later in life. So sometimes it's interesting to realize that we all think differently. We have different ways of experiencing the world around us. And this does color the way we discuss and describe our experiences and the way that we understand the things that happen to us. Um, I am from the United States originally, but I have been exposed to many languages all my life. I was adopted at birth. I grew up among Spanish speakers. I learned French in school and had a facility for the language. I learned German and Welsh through my grandparents. I learned Thai in self-defense, so I knew when my Thai husband was gossiping about me with his friends. I've learned Indonesian and Mandarin because I lived in countries and needed to know how to speak those languages. And I had an interesting realization when I reconciled with my birth mother, as I was adopted before I was born, to find out that she actually was French. And she explained to me that this was why maybe I could speak French when no one else in my family really had any facility with that language. So it was a very interesting experience to find out that mystery of why that language was in my head. The only downside I have with languages, and this is something that really affects the way I look at the teaching and learning side of language, even English, is that I learned early on in life that despite being able to speak a number of languages, I'm not able to go back and forth quickly from one language to another. I'm a bit like a very old computer. And when I have one language loaded up, I have to wait until the other language loads up to be able to speak in it. So sometimes I'll wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning with a great comment in that other language. And that makes it quite challenging. So when I think about educating our students at my school, I really think a lot about how to facilitate that openness between the different languages that might be in someone's mind so that they can be very flexible and go back and forth among the languages, because I feel that that's quite a phenomenal ability and skill. Okay. So how did I come to open an international program at a Thai school? This is a bit of a journey. I was working at the newspaper and I was editing the education section, and I came across this quote by this very interesting woman who at that time was the deputy governor of Bangkok in charge of community development. And it really resonated with me. I had been teaching in Taiwan for a few years before I became a journalist, and I had developed an English language program because I was very frustrated with how English was being taught in the early 90s. It was generally very rote patterns of conversation, helping the children have these forced conversations, having them learn how to speak about Christmas, 4th of July, all of these interesting Western holidays, but they weren't able to talk about things that they were experiencing, like Chinese New Year or dragon dances or the Mid-Autumn Festival or the dragon boat races. And so I developed an English language program to integrate with their mainstream learning, to try to tap into that learning that was going on and help them have the English and talk about that so that we could develop conversations around their life, their daily life, their immediate learning. And so I wrote to Achan, which means teacher. It's a revered name for a teacher in Thai. So I wrote to Achan Prapapat and said, oh, hi, I've seen you're opening a school. I have this idea for an English language program. Would you be interested to hear it? So 4 meetings later, I found out that I was part of the team. It was a bit by osmosis. So for 2 years, I developed the English language program as they were developing the new Thai school. It was an alternative school. It had the Waldorf Steiner approach where things were very natural, hands-on, a lot of music and kinesthetic movement, and being outdoors as much as possible. And as you'll see when we have more pictures of the school, it's a very beautiful setting. So being outdoors while it is hot is also quite enjoyable. especially for the children. After 2 years, I went back to get my master's degree in education, and I returned in 2004 and was all set to revamp their high school English language program. And I realized then that my daughter could no longer learn in Thai. Her cognitive academic language proficiency for Thai was gone. And so I realized I needed to move to an international school. And that's where my journey with the IB began. So that journey has taken me since 2005 until now, and to many really amazing schools, and to becoming a workshop leader and building quality curriculum unit plan reviewer, and also developing the career-related program as well within my school, besides the middle years program. Anyway, so I was away in international schools with my daughter, and I was visiting the woman that took over my position back in 1998. And she was saying, oh, you know, there's so many students now at Rungarun with really good English, and they want to learn more in English, but they want to continue the style of education and the Buddhist values and the hands-on learning that we're doing. And the school is really interested in the IB program as a good match. So, you know, maybe you should talk to Ajahn again and see if she would like you to come back. And I did. And that's how in 2019, I left my position in Jakarta and came back to open the Rungarun International School. So when you are creating a program within an existing school, it is sometimes a bit more challenging, I think, than when you are starting fresh with no expectations around. We had very deep roots from Rungarun School, from the Thai school. We had very loyal parents and families. We had a lot of interest, never having advertised the school at all. It was always by word of mouth. So we had quite a following, and we began the school looking at keeping these same roots and growing the new school as part of and within the existing school campus. So to understand a bit more about the language development and how this is about growing English, at the time that I started, there were about 5 non-Thai staff in the school. And since 2019, we now have about 40 non-Thai staff in the school. This has created a real need in the Thai staff to develop their English, to interact with us, as well as our need to come to some understanding about Thai language and Thai culture as well. So in 2019, when we sat down to create our graduate profile, it was myself and my Thai directors. And we were working from the Thai expectations and the Thai Buddhist principles, which is why you can see with self-aware, we have the Sati Sampajana and thoughtful Yoniso Manasikara, which are the Pali terms. So for the Buddhist directors, this made perfect sense to use these Buddhist terms, and everyone would know what this meant. And I said, well, not everyone really knows what this means. So we started to think about how are we going to present ourselves in an international way to people outside of the community of Thai practitioners, of Thai Buddhist teachers in this very lovely but quite closed community school. So we really looked at how are we going to transfer those Buddhist values into something more global, and how are we going to help incoming teachers understand our holistic and transformative pedagogical practices. So one of the first things we had to sit down to do was to translate the competencies. And we did this so that we would be able to understand very clearly what these root values were of the Thai school. And this became a project that took us maybe 3 months. There were about, I would say, 8 or 9 competencies. And they were written in Thai and very roughly translated into English. And I was handed them and said, oh, can you just fix the English, edit it a bit? But if you can see from the green, the top green translation, it makes some sense, and yet it doesn't make sense. And as I started to try to translate these or to brush up and make them clearer in English, I realized I needed to really know what was happening in the Thai. The English that I had was coming from my perception of what I thought they meant, but it was not really coming from what they really meant. So we could sit down with this small sentence here, and it could take us 3 hours of discussion. And through those discussions, we realized that our understanding of words in English were very different. The idea of connotation, they had denotation, but they did not necessarily have connotation of the words. I didn't necessarily understand the terms in Thai. So when they were coming to me in this kind of English translation that wasn't quite making sense, we ended up having to really, well, what does that really mean? What does that feel? What do you think when you're talking about being conscious when reflecting oneself? Is that self-reflection? Is that reflecting your feelings going out? Do you mean being conscious internally of what's happening inside you? Do you mean being conscious of externally what's happening outside you? So there were 4 of us, 2 Thai and myself and my friend Carol. And it was a really interesting experience. Perhaps for you sitting there in the audience, it's hard to convey because it probably sounds quite boring, but the discussions were really quite unusual and deep. And having this experience of discussing and finding, even from my friend who is also from the US, but lived in Thailand for over 40 years now, coming to our understanding of each other and what do we mean when we hear this, when we say this, where are we similar, where are we different, and how are we going to help bring this understanding? It was such a moment of deep connection between the 4 of us, and when it worked, I said it, it's a visceral impact. You could feel it in your core, like, we are all there. We all understand this now. And it started me thinking a lot about communication and how to communicate in a way that we have that impact. I'm thinking to this morning's keynote about, speaking persuasively and things that you do in terms of your tone, your inflection, your energy, your force. There's also something about that choice of word, that shared connection of understanding something and coming to that understanding through that discussion together that was not necessarily in my practice before this experience. So then, of course, having foreign teachers and having students that need to practice a more global and international perspective, how do you take Buddhism and put it into practice? How do you integrate Buddhist practices and values in your subject areas? How do you take words from Pali and Sanskrit and Thai and make them everyday language for your students to be able to talk about them and understand these very deep, culturally resonant words for them, and find the right way to talk about them and experience them in English? So we were very fortunate to work with Victoria Subarana, who has created what she calls the pedagogy for transformation and evolution, which are these amazing, very simple, concrete activities that you can do with even kindergarten children so that they can understand these different Buddhist concepts, these different, she works from Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Christian traditions. She's studied with many different religious practitioners and learned different tactics from them and tried to put them into very practical activities for children so that they can develop what she calls mental maturity. And that is somewhere in between resilience, emotional balance, self-awareness, and self-discipline. So these are just two of her activities. One, practicing the right speech. So, you know, we know from Tolstoy's short story about, you know, how do you speak correctly when you must, is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? You know, is it accurate? So, you know, there's this activity that she has where she actually has little keys and they have to rewrite some very difficult and teen kind of angry teen speech or gossipy kind of speech. And how would you convey this? What would you do? How would you actually practice putting this into the correct way of speaking so that your words have the intended message and your words have a positive impact? And with our older students, she has a long process of different activities about understanding the process of dying and how do we speak about that? Because in many cultures, speaking about the end of life and death is a taboo. And we've had not quite a few, but a few students who lost family. And, you know, how do you as a community, how do you offer solace? How do you offer comfort in a compassionate way? How do you help that person feel comfortable to be how they need to be to process those emotions? So she has these different activities to understand the process of death and dying and what happens to those of us left behind and how do we work through that together. We also practice phenomena-based field studies. So we do have field trips. We go to museums, we go see movies, we go to parks, but we also go to locations to integrate into that village or that area, to do something with the villagers, to do different kind of service action through their needs from their perspectives, and also to learn about traditional Thai culture and some of these vanishing practices. And additionally, we are a sustainable school. The school went through a drive in the early 2000s to commit to being as close to zero waste as possible. They reduced their garbage by 80%. They treat the wastewater. We have a looped water system. We treat wastewater. Our science lab wastewater is treated differently. On the right, the little moving video is actually our recycling house. So students have to break down anything, plastic, paper, whatever, clean it, prepare it correctly, come to this area and recycle it. So one of the big things we had is that all of the signs in this room were in Thai. So now having an international school coming down and using it, we have to provide English for the teachers to be able to support the students to sort all of these different things. So that also has been a very big project amongst the students and the teachers and the Thai staff as well, to create more English signage so that everyone knows how to manage the waste properly. So pulling all of these different ideas together and these different elements of this very enriched Thai program and trying to turn it into an IB adjacent or an IB able program. We had to develop a vision and mission statement that really reflected our values, coming from those competencies that we translated, coming from a global perspective on Buddhism and maybe I would say spirituality and self-awareness. So our student demographics are 98% Thai or Amerasian or Eurasian. 80% of our students currently move from the Thai school to our school. Our school starts at grade 6 and now goes to grade 11, and next year will grow to grade 12. 58% of our students take language and literature English, which means that they are bilingual Thai and English. So our demographics will change as we grow. We're now in our 3rd year of operations, so we are hoping we will grow and attract more foreign students. But how do you do that when you're within this very deep Thai cultural context and when you are within a very monocultural setting? Is our biggest question. How do we do that? And so the easiest and most immediate thing that I could manage to bring different English contexts and international perspectives to my students was to be very broad in my hiring and to really try to hire a wide range of nationalities. I wanted my students to feel that their culture was reflected, that their region was reflected, but also to have native English speakers as well as non-native English speakers. I feel it's very important to have Thai teachers and other Southeast Asian teachers with very fluent English because they are excellent role models for the students, and they help lift those students from feeling scared to feeling confident that they can manage. So one last quote from Ajahn Prabhupada. Whenever we are complaining about our students, you know, you are all teachers. So I'm sure when we complain about our students, or when we feel, why are they doing this? And why aren't they taking more notes? Why are they rushing through their work? Why are they chatting through class? She always says, look at yourself first. What are you doing? What's happening inside you? Your students reflect you. Your students watch you so carefully. What are you doing? And how is that impacting them? So this is where we always start with our teachers, is really unpacking their self-awareness and their practices. We opened when COVID first hit and had the first lockdown. So for our first 2 years of school, we actually were online and then hybrid. It was quite jarring for our students who'd always been a hands-on experiential learning, and also for our teachers who'd worked diligently for almost a year to plan a beautifully interdisciplinary curriculum. And we had to scrap that. We had 2 weeks to completely revise our curriculum to be online indefinitely. So our teachers are very collaborative. Sometimes it can feel we're all very together a lot and working a lot and discussing a lot. And we also, yes, at the beginning, we shared our space with geese and monitor lizards. We were in far buildings while our new building was being completed. So that brings me to this year, which is quite exciting for us because it's our first time to be all together on site, to be able to do the program as we intended to do the program, to extend to the e-assessments, which we are doing this year, And so I'd like to share with you one of our students' videos, which I think will show you a lot about our school. She's given me permission to use this video. It's from her e-portfolio, and it was for her design project. So I hope you will enjoy it, and let me know. The volume is a bit loud, so I will turn it down. Hopefully it will not be too loud. But for those of you also online, just be aware.
A day at Riverwood International School starts with a student walking up 4 flights of stairs. Today, we're going to see what a day in the life is like for students at this marvelous institution. We have students ranging from grade 6 to grade 11, and we are growing every year. This is Paul. She is a proud student of RAS. She is just right on time for class. School makes sure we are all on time. Well, almost all of us.
I really like my friends.
The environment.
Of course, the teacher. I love all my teachers, my friends, and the school system.
Well, it was nice. I can keep a walk, refresh my mind.
Everything.
I really like the people environment.
It is now time for arts and music class. Paul is now walking down the stairs to her music room. We got drums, keyboards, guitars, bass, everything you need. This is the art room, where students get to express their psychological issues. Paul then walks down some more stairs, heading to the top of the art science lab. At this school, we do very fun and safe science experiments.
Very happy. Yes.
I'd say so. I'm not happy with anywhere.
I would say so. Sure.
Yes, I am very happy here.
Now, it is time to cook. Yes, you heard that right. Students here are also the chefs. In the morning, students go buy ingredients at the school market, then they come back to cook whatever their hearts desire. Today, we will cook this, 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 this. Now, we cook. Voila! Our final dish, pepper power inside. RAS hires teachers from diverse cultures, and I believe we will keep hiring. It is the afternoon now. That means it's time to turn on our life and savior, the AC. We like to keep our students on their toes.
Come on, hey, go. Oh, fine.
This is our design room. Students work on various projects here. They have a tank robot that cleans the floor, a Linea and this Polly Pocket with Colombian culture inside. Paul is currently working on a design project. She plans to make a video representing a wonderful school. RAS always makes sure to be sustainable, and we recycle everything we use at this station.
Allowed to actually say that answer, or
In school, of course.
I think we do quite well.
Well, we try our best. Before going home, students must take care of their own personal space. In conclusion, if you're a student here, these are things you will get. 1. Strong leg muscles. Number 2. Cooking skills. Number 3. International awareness. And number 4, and most importantly, amazing friends.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, so you can see in the average day of our students, there are a lot of, we call them daily life moments or community moments where we need to develop their English. For instance, now remember, these are all Thai students and they're in a kitchen. It's a dangerous situation. There's open flame, there's knives, there's, chilies, there's have to be hygienic about the cooking. And, they know these things a little. Some of them know a lot of cooking, but say sixth graders don't know much at all. And so we have to teach them the name for all the utensils. We have to teach them the words for the safety. We have to teach them the words for chop, dice, slice, for be careful, for move your fingers in, all of these different things. It's a challenge because of course they want to do things quickly. They want to chit chat with their friends, and how to pull them out of that and help them start to pepper their language with more English and to feel comfortable and confident to do that. It's a daily, I don't want to say a battle, but it's a daily chore for the teachers, to step in and engage them in a conversation, be part of their cooking, be part of the cleaning. In the design lab, we have a wall where we have everything labeled. And when they need to use something, they must use it by the proper name. So it's very important to us that they are able to make use of those little words, but it's such a large amount of vocabulary, and it's not something we can quiz them on or test them on because they have their subject vocabulary, which they have to get quizzed and tested on and use. So it's one of those things that kind of goes along, and we have to be intentional about it. We have to really think about stepping in and being uncomfortable for a moment, saying, hey guys, what are you doing? Can you tell me? Can you explain? And, it's not easy as an adult. You want those teenagers to have their time and their time to chat and relax and have fun. So we have to develop the kind of relationships with our students where that is okay. And they're happy to bring us in and share things with us, or to say, oh, so-and-so is having a really hard day and I need to talk to her. It's okay. Can you talk with someone else right now? We have to have that kind of open conversation ability with our students. One of the things that I didn't expect when I was hiring this very diverse group of non-native English speakers was the impact it would actually have on the listening comprehension. Now, as we heard in the morning's keynote about some of the challenges, which I'll talk about next too, the challenges when you have, as a non-native English speaker teacher, teacher-student situation, there are those challenges about whose pronunciation is the most correct, and the way that accents or accented English is looked at in different parts of the world and considered inferior, or this English is considered superior. I am a global-minded person. I look for the day when we are a global community more than now, in the Michio Kaku sense of a type 1 civilization society. And so I'm kind of pro global English, but I do believe in the importance of fluency. And the thing that I did not expect, if you see on this chart in gray, The gray is actually the expected. Like when I've had students, usually when students come from a non-English learning environment into an English learning environment, you have a very quick increase over the first year in that English, because they're getting English everywhere all the time, more than they had before. So their listening really peaks and then it plateaus. But what I didn't expect, and what I found, this was through follow-up testings with the Oxford Online English, and it has 4 parts, and one of them is listening. What I didn't expect was that their listening comprehension would actually continue and not plateau until, I'm going to say, about the second, halfway through the second year, toward the 3rd year, then it starts to plateau. So they had a much sharper continuation of that listening comprehension development. And I think it's because they had so many different accents of English and different vocabulary uses, different syntax uses, that they were constantly having to shift and listen carefully for the words, the message, the meaning, and what is the English underneath the accent I'm hearing, you know, because we have teachers from Zimbabwe, from Bhutan, from 3 different parts of India, from the Philippines, and from Wales, different accents all the time. And I feel that that was a real benefit, that their listening comprehension continues to grow at a stronger pace than I would have anticipated. Now, I haven't done a formal study. If I ever do a PhD, this is probably going to be it. But it was really interesting, and it's the only different factor that I could see from other demographics where I've had this kind of non-English environment to English environment change. So that was just a very interesting thing that I noticed. As we heard this morning, you know, there's pros and cons about vocabulary, syntax, pronunciation, and the overall meaning and content. Again, I feel having the non-native English speaker teachers helps students work harder at communicating meaning and message more mindfully and more thoughtfully. But you do have to work harder to ensure their pronunciation, syntax, and vocabulary all the time. We're constantly correcting and reminding even ourselves when we mispronounce something. As someone else was saying earlier, that idea about being willing to fail and having that willingness to fail. We have to be willing to be incorrect and correct ourselves in front of our students. Okay, so wrapping up with the reflections, some things that we really are exploring and thinking about is this idea of language and identity. And is it really possible to separate language and identity? Sorry, I'm going to skip over this because I'm running out of time. And also, is it possible to separate language and culture? I've been doing a lot of reading with Alan Watts and with Milton Bennett about culture. And this is the area right now that our school is really looking at, is intercultural communication. So not just speaking English fluently, but also understanding our cultural biases, where we're coming from when we're speaking English or our mother tongue. I feel I started a bit late, but I'm just worried that I'm running over. So having these experiences between the Thai and the Western communication really highlighted a lot in the fact that we think differently. That affects how we phrase our speaking, and that also affects how we receive those messages. I know this isn't anything stunning or earth-shattering, but when you see it in practice on a daily basis and have to find ways to overcome the emotions that come when you get messages that hit a way that they probably weren't intended, And how do you have a conversation with someone about that to help them understand how to frame that conversation in a different way? It's a constant intersection of culture and communication. Okay. So I guess to wrap up, one of the things to really think about and uncover is, what is our purpose in teaching English? What is it that we are looking to achieve? And what is it that we really want to accomplish when we're teaching English? We're always balancing the idea of translanguaging and balancing the idea of developing English. How do we develop that English? Because, as the IB says, all teachers are language teachers. We all teach the language of our subject. We all highlight and develop that in English or whatever the language of instruction is for our students. And one question I always think about with my students is how translanguaging can support that shift from basic interpersonal communication skills to cognitive academic language proficiency. Because we want them to be able to develop ways to think about and analyze and express those deep thoughts. But at the same time, how does translanguaging block that shift when they get stuck in the mother tongue and can't move themselves out into pushing themselves into using English more proactively to talk about their learning and talk about themselves? As IB practitioners and even teaching using the Cambridge curriculum, we are constantly integrating content and language learning. And that's a very tall task for teachers, and it's a very tall task for students to try to bring in content and language at the same time. So I urge everyone to think about and go back to those, like Cummins' quadrant of looking at the difficulty of the task and the message and how concrete or abstract is it. Thinking very carefully about that when you're planning your activities and you're planning your assessments to really help the students move themselves into feeling that confidence with English, feeling the ability that they can make those mistakes in a safe environment, and feeling that self-discipline to want to push themselves to always try without us having to have the stick shaking at them to get them to keep using more English. This was something I did early on in my master's, and I completely forgot about it. And someone brought it back to my mind a couple years ago, and it just really made a difference when I started planning my activities with this in mind for my students, particularly because of the language issue, and moving from the beginning of a unit to the end of the unit in a way that's going to build up from undemanding to demanding, from context embedded to context reduced. And finally, your community is very important. What do people want? What do people need? It's important that we are understanding of our parents' expectations, but we have those conversations with them to see how realistic are they. It's important that we work with our students, develop their self-discipline and confidence, their perseverance, help our teachers, because you need resources, you need time, you need support and mentoring and discussion and collaboration so that you have what you need to take those actions in teaching and learning. And then finally, as leaders, how are we going to develop our understanding to better communicate, mediate, and manage this process of bringing English more into the daily communication of the students as well as the classroom communication of the students. So these are the 4 questions that I am always asking myself. And when I have to go address students, or I'm talking with incoming parents, or talking with parents who are wondering why we have teachers who are not native English speakers, really thinking specifically about this and how am I approaching this? Why are we teaching English? What's our motivation? Why do we need our students to learn English? What are they expecting from it? How is learning English influencing their culture and their identity? Maybe in a European culture, the impact may or may not be felt as much as it is perhaps in our Asian cultures and by students who are not Western. But learning English is repatterning the way you think and giving you a different shift of how you could even see time or how you think about the values in your life. And that has an impact on your culture and identity. So we need to be aware of that. What do we need to be aware of in our teaching practices so that we are not slipping into, I call it lazy translanguaging. Translanguaging for the fact that we want to get through this quicker. We want our students to understand this, and we don't have a lot of time. If they speak in their mother language, they'll pick it up faster. But we also have to be aware in our teaching practices that's not always beneficial for our students. And sometimes we have to accept it's going to take more time. They're going to build the language through this practice. And then finally, back to yourself. What are my students reflecting about my practices? Why my students are showing me what I have shown them. What is that? And how can I shift my practice? If I want them to do something differently, what do I have to do? And what do I have to think in myself differently? Okay. So thank you very much for your kind listening, your patience. And if you are ever out in Thailand, in Bangkok, I welcome you to come visit our school. We'll be very excited to have any visitors. I hope I've given you at least some things to think about, made you consider some of your ideas, or maybe some of these points have resonated with you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samara.